So in this video, we're going to take a look at the 10x body. So what is the 10x body? Well, there isn't only one 10x body. In fact, there are at least 3 distinct desirable physical states that any person would like to inhabit at any given time. You don't know this, but whatever body type you think you can inhabit at least 5 different states. So there's 5 different versions of your body. At minimum, you want to be healthy, and if you do the appropriate conditioning, you can be fit, and if you put in the time, you could even possess what we call an athletic body. So it isn't the 10x body per se. There's just you and a healthy, a fit, and the fittest version of you. And so the purpose of this video is to give you a bit of an idea that when you do the appropriate testing, you know exactly what state you're in, what level you're at, so that you can also set the appropriate goals. And you're always going to have one of 2 goals. The first goal is obviously the most immediate goal, just what's the next level and to focus on that. But then also you're going to have your long-term goal. And your long-term goal could be to have the fullest expression of your body, or it could be something, a little bit more conservative. Either way, you'll always have, at least 2 goals on the horizon. And so this video will pretty much show you exactly what level you probably are at or could be, and what your goal should be in very specific terms. So we look at the health continuum. So without the health continuum, we won't really understand how to think about what we call the 4 levels of the 10x body. And then we're going to look at the actual biomarkers that define the 10x body at each of those different levels. So the health continuum basically makes the point that, most people think that health is binary, right? You're either healthy or you're not. You're fit or you're not. You're fat or you're not. Rather, health, fitness, your body fat levels, muscle mass, it's really on a continuum, right? Because sometimes you could be, in good shape, but maybe some part of your body is a little bit excessively fat. Or you could be quite healthy and maybe, let's say, only your kidneys are really experiencing some problems. And maybe so you have kidney dysfunction, but that doesn't make your whole body unhealthy, for example. So it's really important to understand that health is not binary, that it exists on what we call a continuum. And so we have gradations of health, and not just for our whole body, but for every level of structural organization, from the molecular to the cellular to the organ system level, all the way up to the entire organism. So it's very, very important to keep that in mind. So let's quickly take a look at what the health continuum distribution looks like. So remember I'd said that you have at least 5 different versions of your body. You have a healthy you, you have a fit you, and you have an athletic you. You also have a proficient you, and you have a pathological you. The whole purpose of this is to show you that, and the point of this is that at minimum you want to be healthy. But sometimes to be healthy is not enough. Because as we age, we necessarily slip into a decline, into a deficient state, and eventually into a pathological state. And if enough, tissues and organs become pathological, it may be enough for us to completely, meet our demise. So the purpose here for us is to, at minimum, inhabit a healthy state, but to create a reserve for our health, what we call fitness, to offset the rate of decline that we all will probably inevitably experience. So what does healthy mean? Healthy just means, as you can see here, there's 0 standard deviations right in the middle. It means it's the mean, it's the average, it's what is completely normal. And a healthy state means you're in an undeclined state, but also it doesn't mean you're in a conditioned state, right? A conditioned state, which would, if you were to condition the body in a healthy state, you would move towards a fitness state because you become stronger or resilient or responsive. Likewise, if you move towards a deficient state, or what we call a decline, then you become deficient. And deficient is an interesting position to be. It's where you're not dysfunctional enough for it to bother you, for you to realize that you are soon to become very dysfunctional in a particular area. It could be, again, it could be at the whole organism level, like in movement. It could be at a cellular level, it could be at the organ level. But either way, remember that all of the things that we could measure and think about in terms of the body will exist on this continuum. And here's what's interesting. If I could measure everything in your body from molecules to cells to organ, and we could look at sort of the relative health of each of those, put it all together, we call that your center of gravity. Where are you? Where's the total organism at? And again, the goal is for us to move towards a fitness state. All right, so what are the 4 levels of the 10x body? Okay, so what I'd like to do here is that usually we think of different levels of fitness, but I'd like to propose a different view. I would like to map the different levels of a person's fitness onto the health continuum, and because I think it's going to give us a little bit more granularity and precision with which to think about the development of our bodies. So if you can imagine, there are again 5 states of the body. There's 5 different versions of you. In the same way, there are 4 levels of the body, and I define them as follows. So remember, on the health continuum, novice would represent the healthy you, and we give that a score of 1. So in fact, if we did a test with you, we did a DEXA scan, we did a strength test and a power test, we did all the tests, got all the information, you would basically get a score. If you were healthy, you get 1. If you are below healthy, so either deficient or even pathological, you would be both 0, right? And again, if you were at 2, that would represent a fit state, and 3, an athletic state. So again, the goal here, again, if you're healthy at 1, you want to go to 2. If you're already at 2, your goal is to go to 3. And again, if you're at 0, either pathological or deficient, then your goal obviously is to at minimum go to 1. So if we map the 4 levels of 10x fitness or of the 10x body onto the health continuum, this is what it would look like. So we get what we call a healthy novice, right? This person represents a completely undeclined state, fully functional, but also an unconditioned state. This person has never really exposed himself to a very specific and specialized stimulus to develop his body in a particular way. So he's just healthy, hovering here in the middle. But presuming he started exposing his body to a particular healthy stimulus, he would start to become fit, and eventually he'd move all the way to 1 standard deviation away from this healthy mean, what we would call the fit intermediate. And if he pushes that along further, he would eventually get to what we call the fit athlete. And likewise, the individual who's below a healthy state, 1 standard deviation below this healthy mean, represented by the 0 here, would be labeled a deficient beginner. And again, if you are so deficient that you are in some respects dysfunctional, you would be a pathological beginner. Either way, beginner always is both 0. So whether you're deficient or pathological, these are actually 2 very different states. One is where you're you're functional, but there is a decline happening in the background, almost like aging. But pathological means there's an actual dysfunction, like you aren't able to move, or you have pain, or something like that. So very important to understand that just because this is a continuum, if you want to push it all the way to the right, doesn't mean it gets better and better and better infinitely, right? So there's actually a point where if you push a person's fitness too far to the right, you may do that at the expense of the person's health, which we'll take a look at in a few slides. Okay, so what are the markers of the 10x body? So again, there are these 3 markers, and they fall in 2 categories. One is a functional marker of the body, and that's power. It's also a mechanical marker. And then we have 2 structural markers of the body, muscle mass and body fat. Now, really, at the end of the day, if you ask anyone, if you ask yourself what really, really matters to you, it really comes down to this. We all just really want to look our best. We want to feel our best and we want to function our best, right? This is really what it comes down to. And so this is why these are the three primary parameters that we use, because muscle mass and body fat really defines, what we look like. Like our best physical self is really determined mostly by the amount of muscle mass we have or our body fat status. Likewise, power, or how powerful we are or how strong we are, power to weight ratio defines our structural status, our muscle mass and our body fat. And so the key thing to realize here, and you'll see I talk about this time and time again, that the goal here is to improve your power to weight ratio. If you just focus on your power to weight ratio as the primary marker of progress, not time in the gym, calories expended, the amount of work that you've done, or just power, but specifically power to weight ratio is the single most precise and accurate marker you can use to guide you towards looking your best, feeling your best, and functioning your best. So let's quickly take a look at the first marker that defines the 10x body. Now, power is perhaps the single most important, accurate, and precise way for us to measure the quality of our exercise. Okay? Why? Power is the variable that most closely correlates with the outcomes that matter to us most. I'm going to repeat that. Power, and specifically your power to weight ratio, is the metric that most closely correlates with the outcomes that actually matter to us. Meaning, if we want to have less fat and if we want more muscle, okay, we need to actually be stronger, and we actually need to have a higher work capacity. That is to say, a higher power output. And the only way to do that is to actually develop our power, our functional ability. Now remember, structure defines function, and function will determine your structure. And so this is a feedback loop onto each other. You use your muscles or your structures, and you use it in a specific way. That's your function, and the way that you use it will reinforce how it is maintained and how it is developed. It's very important to understand this. Okay, so remember, power is the metric that most closely correlates with the outcomes that matter to us the most. For example, if you use time in the gym as your metric, you could spend 2 hours in the gym and not get results. Isn't that true? Right? You can go for a 2-hour walk. Would you get leaner, and would you get stronger, and would you get leaner, and would you build more muscle? No, because the time doesn't work. What about calories? Imagine you were in the gym and you did, and as long as you just counted an arbitrary number of calories, if you thought that the higher number of calories is what's going to get you to your goals, again, you'll find time and time again, in some cases, some people see some results, but it's not because of the calorie expenditure. And in most cases, you'll see that just because you have a high amount of calories, that doesn't mean that is what's going to help you lose weight, what's going to build muscle, or make you stronger, right? Many times you can have people, is it possible to expend a lot of calories but not get strong, not build muscle, not lose fat? Of course, it happens all the time. So calories is not a reliable correlation. Okay, what about work? Okay, work is a lot better, right? What is work? Work is nothing but force times displacement, right? What's the weight that you are using in your workout, and what's the distance that you displace it? We call those reps. And so what's the amount of work that you're doing? Now, work is a lot better, but there's something even more powerful than work. What if we combine time with work? That gives us power. What's the amount of work that you do in a workout, but how quickly did you do it? That really is the difference, right? But this doesn't mean you rush the workout, because this is classic CrossFit, right? It's doing work as quickly as you possibly can. Nothing wrong with that, but for me, it's not going to be the best strategy for most people in most situations, because it requires a high volume. And again, we can't really know the exact amount of work necessary to produce the exact results that we want, that I'm about to show you. Okay, so the next best correlation, next best metric we could use is your power to weight ratio. Why? Without exception, when a person's power to weight ratio goes up, when their power to weight ratio goes up, their muscle mass goes up, their strength goes up, and their fat goes down all at the same time, every time. So not sometimes, like, oh, I worked that for an hour and I sometimes get results and most times I don't. Or I expended calories, but I'm actually not building muscle just by looking at, calorie expenditure. And so the only metric that reliably correlates with the outcomes that matter to us, which is strength, which is muscle, which is fat, is going to be power to weight ratio. So the question I want you to ask is this. Don't ask, what exercise will help me to get bigger biceps? What exercise will help me to burn belly fat? What exercise will make me faster? Rather, the question you want to ask yourself is this. What power to weight ratio should I possess that will allow me to look the way that I want? Low body fat, high muscle mass, lean, strong, muscular. Okay, that is the best question. It's very important to understand that because the way you look is a reflection of how well you perform. It's a reflection of your functional ability. And your functional ability, your fitness, can be measured by a metric no more precise than your power, and even more precise, your power to weight ratio. Now, if you did our power test, the 6X Alpha 1 power test, which by the way is also your 10X routine. Every 10X routine we measure in terms of power, right? Now, also make this point that just because every exercise can be measured in terms of power, endurance, stretching, walking, doesn't mean that they build power. Okay, it's not the same thing. Okay. However, the most important metric with which to judge the quality of your exercise is going to be power. All right. Now, not every type of workout is going to develop your power, whole body power at the same rate. Now, we believe that 10X workouts are designed to maximize your power to weight ratio, your overall power in the shortest period of time possible. Okay. So if you did a power test, you would get a score. Your score would put you on a particular level. And then your number one overwhelming desire should get to the highest level you possibly can be, because that's how you can get a low body fat and a high amount of muscle mass, giving you the appearance that you want. Okay, so what are these levels? So to have a healthy level of power for a female, again, if you look at these numbers here, in pink, this represents female, in blue, this represents male. And so to have a healthy level of power is to have a score of 5 to 7.4 watts per kg. Now, this may not mean much to you, but if you did a 10X workout and we measured your power to weight ratio, you'd get a score and then you'd know what level you're at. And what's interesting is that if I know what your power score is, I can predict what the amount of fat that you have and the amount of lean muscle. In fact, I can predict your body composition just from your power to weight ratio. Of course, there is some exceptions, but I pretty much know exactly what, or I could do it the other way around. By looking at your body type and your body composition, I can pretty much predict what your power to weight ratio is going to be. So a beginner is, if you did the test and you got anything below 5, you would be scored as a beginner. And again, the reason I put beginner as deficient or pathological, I define beginner as someone who is less than healthy, because novice for me is healthy. If you have a power to weight ratio of less than 5 watts per kg as male, you're a beginner. Okay, because that's below a healthy level. You're either deficient or it's pathological. You get like maybe 2 watts per kg. Okay, looking at the second metric that defines the 10X body, we look at your muscle mass, or the total lean percentage of your body relative to fat and bone. And as a benchmark, for males, you're aiming for 85% to be lean, and for women, 80% to be lean. Now, necessarily, if you want to be 85% lean, at minimum, you need to have 12% body fat. Okay. Now, if you were following, you realize that 85 and 12, they don't add up to 100, and that's correct because there's 3% that makes up your bone mass. So for males, typically 3 to 4% makes up male's bone mass, and 3% for women. And so again, if you're going to be 80% lean mass for women, you are going to have a body fat percentage of roughly 15 to 17%, where bone makes the difference. Okay. So there are two tests that we use in testing, in defining the level of your 10x body. Two tests. Your 10x power test. It's really just a 10x workout. But in order for you to actually do the 10x power test, you actually have to learn the 10x method itself. You have to learn how to execute the movements properly and consistently. Then you get to, typically in your fourth workout, we set your baseline. That's your power score. But for your muscle mass and your fat, we use a DEXA scan, and that gives us your lean tissue percentage and your body fat percentage. And together we can get a clear picture of what level you're at. So there are, again, 4 levels. Level 0 defines the beginner. Level 3 defines the athlete, right? And of course, if you're at level 1, your goal is to move to level 2. If you're at level 2, you want to move to level 3. Okay, so let's quickly take a look at what this looks like. Okay, so a healthy individual, right? A healthy level of muscle mass for a female should be between 70 and 74%. So of her total weight, 70 to 74% should be lean muscle mass. For males, 75 to 79. Okay. Your goal again here. Now, your goal doesn't have to be athletic, but just make the point. I'm just making the point that with 10x alone, you can move all the way from a healthy state to an intermediate state, all the way to an athletic body, just using 10x. 2 15-minute workouts per week. Okay. If you just look at my own results, which I'm about to show you again, you'll see exactly how I've done that. But over a 3-year period, I didn't do any kind of work, right? Just patience and applying the protocol properly. So beginner, remember, is defined as anything below a healthy baseline. So 1 standard deviation, usually what I call deficient level of muscle mass, and 2 standard deviations is usually what we call sarcopenia. But either way, whether you're deficient or pathological, you get a score of 0, termed a beginner, and your goal is to move from a beginner state to a novice. And you wouldn't believe how many people, the average person today, for me, is not even here. It's not healthy or at a novice state. The average person is deficient. Okay. Okay, moving to the third and final marker that defines the 10x body, your body fat percentage. The benchmark for men should be 10% and for women 15%. But again, that's the benchmark. Benchmark is going to be athletic. Assuming you want to be in athletic state, these are the numbers that you are looking for. But again, you could be very happy just going from level 0 to 1 or level 1 to 2. You could literally just stay there. Most people look pretty good just in an intermediate state at level 2. Technically, I'm between a level 2 and a level 3. Okay, so again, we derive your body fat values from a DEXA scan, and we address exactly where you should do a DEXA scan, how you can do it, how to interpret your DEXA scan in coming videos when we talk about 10x body testing. Okay, total fat tissue is your total body mass divided by your total fat tissue mass. That gives us your body fat percentage. Now I'm going to say something very important here. It's possible for you to decrease your body fat percentage without losing any fat. Okay, it's possible for you to decrease your body fat percentage without losing any fat. How? Because remember, body fat percentage is a relative value. Relative to what? Well, muscle and bone. So if you actually increase your muscle mass, your body fat percentage will actually drop. Now, when you carry a lot of excess body fat, it doesn't matter. You're not just looking at the relative value. You also have an absolute fixed value of body fat that you want to lose, and we calculate that. Okay, so the exact amount of fat that you should lose. But sometimes when you're in a healthy state, you don't need to lose any body fat. It's more about picking up muscle mass. Driving up your muscle mass will drive down your body fat percentage levels as a relative value. Okay, so what are the levels here? Again, beginner has a score of 0, and the athlete will have a score of 3. If you have a score of 1, your goal is to go to a score of 2, and you might be happy with 2, and so you don't really care about going to 3, and so you're very happy staying at an intermediate stage. Now, you guys know I'm a big fan of integral theory and Ken Wilber's work, and so there's a saying that goes, stages are also stations of life, meaning that stages don't exist so you'd infinitely grow. Stages exist so that you can choose the stage that is best suited for you, and you station there. It becomes a station. You stay there because you're happy with that level. It doesn't have to be athletic, but for most people, they'll probably want to go to an athletic state. Again, if you are in deficient state, that's 1 standard deviation below the healthy mean of the novice, and that's deficient. But if you actually were 2 standard deviations below the healthy mean, you would be termed clinically obese. But either way, if you're deficient or obese, you're a beginner. You're below a healthy state. Okay, so now let's take a look at some examples of what this transformational journey could look like using this 3D model. Now, looking just at power, so on the left we have the beginner, then we have the novice, the intermediate, and the athlete. So it's basically the same thing here. So these are the different levels, people on the different distribution. So usually these 2 individuals here would represent novice and intermediate. And again, the guys on the far left and far right would represent the tail end of this distribution, as you can see here. Okay, so what I want you to look at is focus on the beginner. So if a beginner has more or less, without exception, I shouldn't say without exception. There are many exceptions. There's always exceptions to the rule. However, it's very uncommon for me to find a person who is a beginner or in a deficient or pathological state in terms of power, meaning that when they do the 10x power test, they score 5 watts or less. They usually have muscle mass that's less than 75%, and they have body fat percentage that's more than 21%, and sometimes way more than that. This person here in real life would represent more like 35% body fat. Okay. Oopsie, now I'm going too far. Okay, likewise, if we look at novice, a novice body will have a power to weight ratio of 5.5 to 7.4 watts per kg. Likewise, his muscle mass would be between 75 and 79%, and his body fat 16 to 21. Okay, again, the intermediate would be between 7.5 and 10, and an athlete would be at 10. And again, their muscle mass is 80 to 85. Once you get to an athletic body, you can see the difference between intermediate and advanced. It's becoming a little bit lean. How do I know this? You actually see this on my own body. And again, body fat, you go from literally more than 21% all the way to 10% or below. And this is literally how your body will transform. Now remember, you have at least 4 different types of bodies, 4 different levels. And most people just need to get into a healthy state. Really, that's my goal, is just to get people from a deficient state into a healthy level. Okay, here's what a real life example looks like. Me. So as a beginner, when I started, these were my numbers. Looking back at my very first, let's say, valid 10x power test score, my score was 4.8 watts per kg. Muscle mass 79% at the time. Fat was 17%. So technically speaking, 17% isn't really beginner. It's more novice. But I'm just showing you for illustrative purposes. So novice, you could see I went from 4.8 power to 7.2 to 8.2 and then 9.4. In fact, again, technically, you have to be 10 or more to have an athletic body. But again, just showing you for demonstrative purposes of how this works. But these are my numbers at the moment. Muscle mass went from 79% to 87% and 70% body fat to 8% over a 3-year period, changing, staying on the exact same protocol, not changing a single variable. Obviously, diet is involved, but I've never really changed the diet. I've always more or less eats in the same amount of calories, and eat very healthily, or at least what I think is healthy. For females, same thing. If you look at the beginner, it's good to look at the extremes. Typically, you find an overweight female incapable of producing a power to weight ratio or having a power to weight ratio score of 2.5 watts per kg and higher on the score, which tells me usually that they probably have muscle mass less than 70% and body fat percent 26 and higher, and almost without exception, this is exactly what we see. Okay, same here with an intermediate woman, aiming for 5 to 7.4 watts. Again, it's just on the cusp of being advanced. 7.4, 7.5 and above would deem an athletic female body, and this is more or less what it would look like. In fact, your body will get smaller on 10x. You'll get smaller, leaner, and stronger, not bigger. In fact, I'll show you exactly a real case study, my mom, on what this looks like. Now, she's not advanced yet, but right now she's gone from a beginner to a novice and to an intermediate stage over a 1-year period. So let's quickly take a look at that. Okay, so here's a real case study. My mom, so when she started a year ago, her power to weight ratio is 2.4, muscle mass 62%, fat 35%. I think this was at the 5-month mark. She went from 2.4 to 4.8. Muscle went from 62 to 7.1, again from a deficient or pathological stage back to a healthy state. So even though she's healthy here, she's obviously not happy with what her body looks like. And again, this is going to happen all the time. So even though you're healthy, right, that doesn't mean you're going to have the body that you want, right? In fact, to really embody the body you want, in terms of the appearance, all things being equal, being realistic and all, you'll have to embody an intermediate or an athletic or an advanced state in order for you to look the way that you want. And in order to do that, you have to be able to function the way that will produce the structures that will give you the appearance that you want. Okay, so she went from 35% body fat to 28%, and now this was 1 month ago. Her power to weight ratio right now is 5.5, muscle mass 75%, and fat is right now 22%. And again, I'm expecting, even though this is a 1-year transformation, to get from intermediate to advanced takes a little bit longer. It could probably take another year, if not longer, but then she'll be where she wants to be in terms of her functional ability and, of course, her physical appearance, her muscle and her body fat. The next slide actually shows her DEXA scan transformation of the same image. So we didn't take a DEXA scan after 6 months. We took it 1 year apart. So as you can see here, she went the body fat percentage of 35 on the left. You can clearly see the difference in fat mass from when she started to a year later, 35% to 22%. And that's what and if you really want to confirm if you've lost fat or not, the pictures pretty much can show you that, but it's always good to have both pictures as well as a DEXA scan to confirm your rate of progress. And there you have it. That is the 4 different levels of the 10x body. I highly encourage you to do a DEXA scan, to do a power test, know exactly where you're at so you know what your goals are, and so you can be inspired by your rate of change. I'll see you in the next video.